he has an adjudicated deportation order, and you have Democrat public officials falling all over themselves trying to get him back here without thinking through the next step, which is he's literally going to be deported somewhere else.
But he did have due process. Everything we know about him is documented because he did go through the court systems. He was stopped for trafficking. His wife did file these domestic violence charges against him. He was arrested with MS-13 members with a roll of cash that had the eyes and the ears and the mouths of the presidents erased, which is an MS-13 mark.
I have to ask it. You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
Husband is alive. That's all I can say.
Okay, and you know I'm not going to push on that apparently, but.
And guess what? All the kinks are worked out today. Everything's working good. I showed up on time. I even have my smoke ready. Hello, everyone. How you doing? Happy Saturday. So I wrote it in the description, but just a quick little mention of this. Yesterday, there's some paperwork left over after my dad passed away, and we thought everything was pretty much done, but no, it had to be signed, and it had to be signed with witnesses and a notary, so we had to get down to somewhere we could do that, and it kind of ended up falling like right in the middle of the, like right around noon and right smack dab afternoon, so it was just long enough to cover through all the time when I normally would do a stream. I was not expecting that at all. It kind of came up the night before, and I had no idea that whoa, I didn't even know exactly what time we were going, but anyway, my brother had to sign, I had to sign. It was just something that had to be done, and unfortunately it came in the way, but that's all right. Just letting you know that was what happened yesterday. I'm trying to get my sort of groove back a little bit more strongly than ever, because I've noticed, man, it seems like a lot of you guys are coming back, and I'm very thank you guys so much. I can't thank you guys enough, seriously. After all the all the hiccups and all of the downtime and all of the messed up situations that have gone on that have been screwing up my consistency on this channel, the fact that that people are still watching makes me feel like, okay, all right, I can't give up. I'm not going to be giving up, and I've said several times I won't. But to see people coming back and still watching, that's the biggest. It's the biggest thank you and the biggest motivator that I have. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. But anyway, so I will be continuing my best to try to keep on a roll and not make a big not make a too big a deal when I miss an episode or whatever. But oh, that was what was wrong. I've had to lose my seat as of late. Oh, hold on. Except I bumped the mic. Sorry about that. Oh yeah, much better. And by the way, I did get my new chair finally. I finally got a new chair because this one literally is falling apart. Like on the arms, all of the little fake leather is all gone. On the seat, most of it is gone. And it's just the cushion is pretty much all gone. Yeah, so I badly needed a new chair. And this time, because I've had bad luck with anything with like the sort of pleather sort of seats and arms, so this time I went with something I haven't ever gone with a computer chair, which is it's got the sort of felt sort of material covering. So that should also work wonders, because summers get real bad here. They get really hot, and if you aren't wearing clothes that can breathe and you aren't sitting on something that's not too not too good at allowing air to kind of flow a little bit easier through it, then you are going to be in for some uncomfortable situations. But so that I thought that was a good idea on both situations. Not to mention the fact that the place I bought it, they were having a big sale at the time I bought it, and it was over $100 off. It was actually over 50% off. So got kind of lucky on the price as well. So I was like, whatever. It's the same company, the GT Plier. I have no endorsements or anything. I have no endorsements with them. I will say they make pretty good computer chairs at a very reasonable price. Not like some of the other companies they make pretty good chairs, but man, the price goes through the roof when you buy basically anything. Even their cheaper chairs are fucking off the charts with the price, and unfortunately, they aren't any really better quality from my own experience than anything else. I mean, unless you're going with their super high-end stuff, but that's like, then you're charged some kind of ridiculous price, so even more ridiculous. Anyway, this is, I think this is dying. Oh, well, anyway, so we are going to kind of go over a few things from this week that I talked about, and then cover one thing that I didn't, which is kind of the main focus. I meant to get to it this week, but I never did because I was waiting till, well, really, honestly, it wasn't that I was trying to avoid that story. It was just that the ones that I did talk about were ones that were a little bit more, for me, a little bit more important. They had a little bit more subject matter that was particularly either of interest or really got under my skin, like especially in the case of the one with Douglas Murray and Dave Smith, which, by the way, just as a quick mention, because I'll get into a clip in just a second here, but as a quick mention, I shouldn't have done it. I was telling myself, you shouldn't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And like an idiot, I did it anyway. I watched a Piers Morgan segment where he had Dave Smith on and some other guy. I don't remember his name, but it was some other guy who was on the opposing side of things. And it didn't go well because, and it was really frustrating and honestly annoying as hell to watch because, first off, despite being really, in my opinion, a real arrogant son of a bitch, Dave Smith is very charismatic when he speaks. He's got a very authoritative voice in the way that he speaks, which is kind of funny that he's a libertarian, but he's got an authoritative way of speaking. But nevertheless, he knows how to wordplay to win over an audience, and probably because of the fact that he's also a comedian. He has been a comedian for a long time. I never really knew about him, but I mean, I won't judge. I won't judge at all. I'll just say that he has been a comedian. That's kind of how Joe Rogan and him know each other, and they're pretty good friends. But the other guy was not. He was making decent arguments, but the main crux of the problem was he fell into a trap that is something that a guy like Dave Smith is going to be just waiting for somebody to make, that he's going to be able to pounce on as soon as it happens, which is he kept appealing to authority when making his arguments. So what do I mean? Well, he kept trying to reference international law, international courts, wartime definitions, and things like that would you would use if you were adjudicating a case. And the problem is, and like I said, Dave Smith had no problem jumping on this, which is, it's a scummy move, but it's easy for him to do, is that he kept turning it back to, but we're talking about the morality of the situation. We're not talking about what some courts will say about it, blah blah blah. It's like, okay, yeah, I get it, but and so it's just it was a bad it was a bad matching because the guy was knowledgeable on the situation, but that wasn't the crux of the problem. And here's the thing: this has gotten strawmanned, and the focus has been reshifted, and the whole thing has gotten taken off track. And people need to remember this thing started because more than anything else, because Douglas Murray made a statement. And it's a completely, I mean, in any other circumstance, if you had heard this statement, I think just about everybody would agree. Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah. His statement was, if you're going to form an opinion about something, or if you're going to take a stance about something, you're probably going to want to have the best possible amount of information, the most amount of information you can possibly get. You're probably going to want to be as close to it as you can get. And ideally be able to see it and experience it with your own eyes and your own presence to be able to get the best perspective on the situation. And is the matter of Israel versus Gaza, or Israel versus Palestine, or whatever you want to call the conflict, or Israel against radical jihad. Douglas Murray is somebody that, I mean, to be fair to everybody else, Douglas Murray is a madman. Like, he's a guy who will be on a plane in a second when a conflict breaks out, and he has no problem going into. The guy's a lunatic. I swear, he's insane. He's been in so many war zones. It's crazy. But yeah, and it's because of his ethics and his strong journalistic integrity. The guy is a real solid reporter. And the problem was that that wasn't what. You see, Dave Smith used the only card he had to play, which was a straw man. And that's what really pissed me off. That was what really pissed me off, was that Douglas Murray was shocked, and rightly so, based on, because the thing is, so many people talk about this conflict, this Gaza, Israel-Gaza conflict, and almost all of them have no idea where the conflict is, what's going on, who is on what. Like, they know next to nothing about it, and they just jump on the situation. Now, Dave Smith is much smarter than that, and he knows the history of the region. However, my biggest problem is there is so much propaganda that is put out by pro-Hamas sympathizers. I mean, they're not the Iranian censorship machine is a very real and very powerful media ecosystem that exists in countries all over the place. And this you have to figure that there's no way in hell. As a matter of fact, this was probably one of the biggest things that was talked about before October 7th. There's no way that Hamas stands a chance against the IDF. They knew that. Their hope was, and it's been working like a charm, is to get the world to have a negative sort of negative impression of Israel, especially the longer the conflict goes on. They're going to push propaganda. That's why I talked about that clip last time. This is where the veil kind of got lifted for me, and I recognized, wow, that like nothing is sacred to them. Nothing is, which, I mean, I should have guessed that already, but when you see it, once again, when you see it, it's kind of jaw-dropping. Nothing is sacred. Nothing is off limits. No tactics are too dirty. No lie is too egregious to use as an example. The ends always justify the means. And when I talked about that story about how they were trying to film a scene of some lady who was crying like her baby got killed in all this rubble, when the dumbass cameraman accidentally turned the camera on too early, and even though the camera was just kind of pointed at the ground or all around all over the place, you could hear the actors from the film talking and chuckling and laughing and having a good time, and then as soon as the actual camera comes up and it's time for the scene, her demeanor immediately changes to hysterical crying mother who just is probably lost her child in a building collapse. And the dumbasses had no idea that they left that in when they put it up, I guess, because that was what the situation kind of had playing out. And once again, you know, the focus has been entirely shifted away from, and this is what makes me sick the most. When's the last time, I haven't heard Dave Smith ever mention it, how many people on the left and how many people opposed to the conflict there, how many people, do you ever hear him mention the hostages? You notice that? That's what really fucking pisses me off. Because when I hear people talk about how Israel could just stop stop bombing all over the Gaza area and you know, let them just live their life. Here's the problem. First off, they're not going to just let them live their lives, because if they let them just live their lives, that means that Israel is going to be destroyed, because that's their goal. And this, you know, no matter what's going to happen, international support for Israel is going to drop, and they have to know that as well. That's the other thing. They're making all these decisions knowing that's the case, but they don't have any choice. It's also sick that aside from Trump and his cabinet and some knowledgeable conservative individuals, a lot of people also don't really seem to ever bring up the fact that we still have hostages in Gaza that are there. And I can't understand how you would be... So as a responsible thing, as a leader, to get up in front of some cameras in front of the world news and be like, yes, so we're going to... we're no longer continuing our efforts to root out the members of Hamas from the area. We're not going to be making any requests anymore. We are going to declare a ceasefire now. And by the way, the citizens of this country, sorry, you're out of luck, though. You're going to have to remain, you know, in dungeons, tortured by Hamas for the rest of your life. So I'm sorry about that. But to everybody else, like, how fucking sick is this shit? What are they supposed to do? Because I can tell you, I just recently heard there was another ceasefire. There's another ceasefire offered by Israel, and it was turned down by Hamas because the ceasefire included the return of all hostages. There you go. Like, where's the evilness on this one again? I mean, I don't get it. I don't get that. Even if you think that there's more that could be done by Israel to prevent innocent civilians from being killed, yeah, that may be true. But the problem is that this is a culture that, number one, like when they talk about the children, that's one that's hard. And I know this is hard to talk about. And believe me, I know that this is sensitive territory. But you got to remember that the children in Gaza are not like the children of America or the children of England or the children, you know, Western countries, or, you know, countries where they actually have, you know, leaders that actually even pretend to care about them. These are kids that are raised from like age 10 to hate Jews, to throw rocks at Jews, to regard all Jews as the enemy, never trust Jewish people. And Israel, where they all live, yeah, we want to get them out of there. We want to kill them all so that we can get that land back for our use. And I mean, these are things they're taught in school. And so I'm not saying that means they deserve to die. I'm just saying that they are already, you know, being propagandized by that age that if they were to see that on the street, they wouldn't see any kind of, they would never ever see a situation where they would be questioning the way that Hamas does. Because truth be told, I saw something the other day that really made me proud, and it was a newer one. There's a very, very strong anti-Hamas sort of organization forming in Gaza, and this was after one of their main spokesmen was captured, tortured, and killed by Hamas. That this time that only seemed to have bolstered the group and strengthened them, and those are the people that are worth saving 100%. The people that are brave enough and strong enough and just they recognize the stakes in this conflict, that are able to overcome the fear of it. Was like the protests in China. It's that kind of courage that really shows that that there's people there that deserve far better than this, and that are worth saving. It's just something where they have to get over their fear and actually their hesitation even to alert someone from Israel, someone from a compassionate country of some kind, that we're tired of living like this. We can't live like this anymore. We can't live under this kind of authoritarian rule anymore. We can't live while international aid that pours in, that's supposed to be for us, always ends up being confiscated by Hamas so that they can fire more rockets and feed their terrorist members of their organization and keep the conflicts going. Like they, no matter what they believe in Gaza and what whatever it is that they're taught, there's got to be some inkling of a doubt when that is the way of life, and you can't even get running water, and Hamas gets all the humanitarian aid that comes into the country, because they will use it all for something, either break down metal components to make rockets, or break down or distribute bags and backpacks so that they can use them for kits to carry with them for operations for suicide bombers. And once again, and also, kids as young as 16 years old oftentimes are suicide bombers. That's the other thing. That's another huge danger for the IDF, is the fact that, suicide bombers, they're not always men, and in their, they're not always men, and they're not always men in their adult years. They're oftentimes young children in their teens who are able to get the sympathy of an IDF soldier to attempt to save them, only to find out that they've got a suicide vest strapped to them and are ready to blow. And it's once again, I'm not trying to demonize the kids, but it's sad. It's incredibly sad. And how do you fight against that? Well, I don't know the answer. I can't give a straight answer on the best thing to do, but all I can say is that I'm not in a position to tell Israel what you're doing is evil. I have no idea what you should do exactly in response, but what you're doing is just the wrong way to go. And that seems to be every leftist Democrat in this country, with their ridiculous fucking non-answers to everything. How they see it is that, they should just stop. They should just have a ceasefire, because there's the stories, and in these stories there are American politicians who were in the same boat, that were calling on Israel on October 8th that we can't have armed conflict. We can't have conflict that go out in the region. It's like, sorry, what country are you in again? Because you're not in Israel, and we'll handle our own decisions. Thank you very much. But it's just the whole thing is so complicated. So my biggest beef was that I said this before, but I've never been to Israel, and I might not be able to fully grasp the situation, which is why I will always throw out the caveats of, when I know or don't know something, I will or will not talk about it. But I can tell you one thing: I do know journalism. I didn't. I'm not kidding when I say, you know, I spent all my college years doing every journalism course I could take in my college that I went to, and this was at a time, mind you, when you could take a journalism course, which, and as I said before, I live in California, and this is at a time when even in California you could take a course in college that was a journalism course, and the teacher of that course would tell you very early on that yes, it's true that the media has always had a left-wing stance or a left-wing leaning bias. Some places more than others, but it's always been there, and not get fired for it. You know, not get fired for telling the truth about the fact that most of the media has, yes, historically been slanted pretty left, because it's true. You can go through, you know, and look at old news reports, and even some of the most highly regarded reporters in television could clearly, from time to time at least, be recognized as, you know, a little bit partisan. And the way that you can really tell is, this was my point with Dave Smith, is that you can, there's different words to use to connotate the same sort of meaning, but some of them have a little bit more of a harsher tone, and some of them are a little bit more softer. Some of them are used to kind of denote that you have a sort of preference for one thing or another thing. I mean, there's ways to word things that can be they can make an impressionable reader kind of form an opinion about it that is kind of slanted in one direction, and the writer of the story, if they're not aware of how their words are sounding, can honestly come off kind of being the word that, or the description that comes to mind is it's a subconscious reveal of one's bias. So and that was the way it was explained to me, and that was you know, when we talked about these things, it was because and another good way to describe this was because this was in the mid 2000s. This was during the Bush administration. It was around the time when the Iraq War was kind of reaching a head, and so the protesting was starting to get pretty big. It was getting a lot louder than it had been before because it was just dragging on and on. And that was back when I was on the left, I'll admit. But at the same time, you know, one of the biggest calls that anyone on the left and anyone that I knew that was on the left was making was to end the war in Iraq. We didn't like the war in Iraq, and we thought it was pointless. And, you know, when the information about the weapons of mass destruction kind of fell apart, and everyone knew that wasn't true, then it was even more intense because we knew we'd been lied to. It wasn't a situation where we were in grave danger from the weapons of mass destruction, and I hated the kind of like hollow attempts to kind of cover up the mistake by suggesting that even if what they say is true, which it's not even what they say. Yes, it's true. There aren't any there, but they would kind of say, like, even if that's not true, this is still a just war. We're bringing democracy. This was when that was a big, you know, that was a big way to justify what was going on, was that we're spreading democracy to these countries that have never known freedom. It's like, well, yeah, look at them now. How are they doing? Oh, yeah, man, they're a bastion of democracy now, aren't they? Just my point, though, is that that was where I really learned, even at that time, while I was on the left, from a left-wing leaning professor who was upfront and honest about his beliefs. Although he had a great poker face, he was very good at that. I couldn't tell all the time which way he was kind of personally leaning in any issue, but he was very honest about the trade. Despite, in fact, we watched for this very reason, we watched 2 documentaries about Fox News. One was from no. Oh, yeah. We did. We watched 2. We watched one about Fox News from left perspective, and then another one from the right perspective. And it was obvious the right perspective was kind of basically of the mindset that, which I think this is kind of a realistic way to think about things. Even then, I was like, well, that kind of makes sense. I mean, because, when you have the whole of media, and at this point, things are way different. But I just mean back then, when you have the whole of media all leaning one direction, and the idea of being completely neutral and unbiased, like would be the responsible thing for a company to do. It's not realistic in the sense that, is it going to draw a crowd? Is it going to draw an audience? Are you going to have anybody that is paying attention to every episode? Not necessarily. It's probably going to be a little harder to get an audience to, and that's the other part, is that, the market aspect of the free press. I don't argue against it, but it does open the door for some kind of crappy business practices that can really be really cynical and honestly disgusting ways to get people to be more invested in one network than another, is by focusing on the most divisive issues as opposed to the most uniting issues, which is part of the reason why we're as ridiculously divided as we are today. But the idea was that the Fox News brand kind of had to arise because there needed to be some counterweight to the left-wing media machine that had been in control of the United States media for decades at that point, maybe longer. So anyway, it was just, we came from a perspective where our teacher was incredibly intent on focusing on that aspect because of how important it was to pass that on to the next generation. And by the way, I wasn't like, if there was anything in school and college that I really dedicated myself to, it was journalism. I was a year-long editor-in-chief. I was 2 years as entertainment editor and editorial editor. I did copy editing. I was a staff reporter for a year and a half. And I took broadcast media, although their broadcast department wasn't as thorough and comprehensive as their news writing classes. So I didn't end up taking everything that had to do with the which is funny because now I'm doing things far more when it comes to news or any kind of information. I'm doing it in a more media form, but or broadcast or live media, video and audio. But back then I was really into news writing, and I've talked about a lot of this stuff before. But just the main point is that I got to the point where I had taken literally every single course I could possibly take that was a journalism course from the college I went to. And I attended multiple conferences that were statewide events that involved all the junior colleges in the state, and competitions were held. And interesting story, on one night when because we flew down to LA for the big conference there, and we snuck out and went to a Nets game. Was it? Or no, not a Nets. Why Nets? What am I talking about? Not Nets. LA Clippers. I'm sorry. Gee, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Yeah, we went to a Clippers game. It was fun as hell. We had a really good time. I remember, though, the side note, but still funny, I had been talking to people in my class because I was like, dude, this is going to be like over the weekend. We should go see Price is Right on Friday. I was trying to get everybody to go down and see the Price is Right with me. But one day my teacher walked in and he said, and by the way, no one is going to be going to see the Price is Right. And I was like, oh, damn, because he looked right at me when he said it's like, and then he looked at, he said, because they actually don't film on Friday, and I was like, oh, okay. So, but it was just interesting. That was back when Bob Barker was still doing the show too, so that would have been awesome. But never got to see them live. But oh well. Anyway, but yeah. So back to my main point though. I'm about to play a clip real quick of this was on Dave Rubin, and it's James Lindsay. I haven't really focused on James Lindsay. I haven't even seen James Lindsay in a long time, but he was weighing in on the whole conflict with the Dave Smith Douglas Murray thing, and he brought up the one he sums this up a little bit better than I do in this one specific term that he uses, and it's something that I should have brought up in my own. I brought it up in a way, but it was a little too abstract. It needed to be more focused, and this is the best way it can be described. So I'm going to pull that up real quick, and we'll check this out, and then we'll go on to the next sort of things, because I'm going to try to go boom, boom, boom through the stories today, because mainly I want to get to the Maryland man Garcia, because that's his new official name now, and his struggles in the Salvadoran jail or prison, Supermax prison in El Salvador, because we're all concerned about his well-being. Yeah. Anyway, but before we get too concerned about it, we'll go over this, because like I said, this is a really good discussion of it. And it also goes into another thing that I've been concerned about myself, which is that the media situation that we live in terms of what's happening with new media versus old media, it's very quickly becoming a situation where old media is getting eclipsed so badly by new media that it's almost seeming like it's just a matter of time now before old media becomes pretty irrelevant and new media is going to dominate. However, and here's where the problem comes up, these things work in cycles, and the cycle seems to be that what's happened before is going to happen again. And so the things that plagued and brought down mainstream media could very potentially and very easily, and honestly very quickly, bring down newer media in the same exact way. So it's another point raised by James Lindsay in this clip. So anyway, I'll stop talking and I'll let this clip go. But hold on, let me move myself over a little bit. Oh, I got to do it from, yeah, duh. Why am I doing it there? Okay. As long as I'm not, no, I'm going to be covering James's face. I don't want to cover James' face because he's going to be the one that's talking mainly. Here, we'll just, we'll just put ourselves over Dave. That's fine. That works. Okay, now we'll just cover Dave up. And then, that's probably better anyway. It's a better look. Nothing against Dave Rubin, of course. Dave Rubin is a friendly-looking guy. I've never met him, obviously, but he's a friendly-looking guy. So, anyway. All right, let's get to this clip before anything gets out of hand anymore. Desktop audio? There we go. All right.
Place where everyone's just going off to their corner to find truth. I do the best I can on this show to tell people what I think. I'm going to have some blind spots and make mistakes every now and again. But as we whirl further into Podcastistan, as Constantine is talking about, is this, like, in some sense, the most dangerous thing that a modern society can be in, where we're just going to all define truth for ourselves? And in some ways, we have to blame the previous gatekeepers because they did not do a good enough job gatekeeping correctly. If I'm framing this correctly, James, feel free to clean that up if you don't agree with.
Real quick, the whole Podcastistan thing, I didn't really understand what he meant by that at first, but it's kind of like basically what is the argument, and this is actually something Konstantin Kisin was discussing, was that right-wing people on on new media platforms are the dominant sort of the dominant channels on most social media platforms. Now, originally, that started off as a natural consequence of the fact that legacy news channels all were dominated by left wing. But the goal should have been to be self-aware enough from the beginning that we don't ever want to be in a situation where we're playing that game of you had your turn, now we're doing the same thing back. No, that should not be the goal. The goal should be to not be playing to any audience and to be reporting factual information. Now, you can have your biases, and if you are an opinion, if you're an opinion sort of channel, like, here I talk about things that I'm opinionated on. I'm very opinionated on. But here's the rub about this real quick, and like I said, James breaks this down far better than anyone else I've ever seen. But I'm not going to talk about something that I really don't know that much about or haven't had at least a good amount of time and effort and reference and things I've looked into to at least make an informed decision out of whatever it is I have formed an opinion on. And if there are aspects of things that I don't know, I'm going to make sure that I bring them to people's attention. And a perfect example, I could just bring this up right now because it just came to mind. The other day when I was talking about the Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf situation and case that's going on now with the murder case or self-defense case or whatever it ends up being. I mentioned that Carmelo Anthony was likely, his parents both weren't there. That wasn't true. I was wrong about that. And I'm sorry about that. I stated that based on something that I got mixed up from another case that I was confusing with the same one, because I didn't really mention anything about his school record. There's not a lot of information that's been released on what kind of the only thing that's been talked about is that he had gotten into several fights at his school. That's not necessarily a sign of somebody who is going to do something deadly. As a matter of fact, that's kind of the opposite, because usually people that fight are the people that don't resort to deadly force to actually resolve an issue. They just are hot-headed and get into fights more often. So why he brought the knife to this event, I just don't understand that part. But I will say that his parents were they weren't like not around at all. They were around, although I have to question their judgment on how they instilled values in him. But I can't necessarily say that this has anything to do with his parents or being raised in a home where they didn't take care of him. And that's also evidenced by the fact that they took the first chance they could get to buy this big house in a suburban community with the money. I mean, there's still a, really, I don't think they're doing the right thing in this situation at all. I think that more has to do, though, with the race hustlers that have made their living off of attempting to divide America on racial lines, and especially in the last 10 years or so, where anytime there's a situation that's illegal that involves a black and white individual, it doesn't matter who the perpetrator is or the suspect or the suspect and the victim. Doesn't matter any of that. It just matters that there's a black and a white individual involved in the case, and then the grifters come in and offer the family a bunch of support and financial help and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, they are just, going out and attempting to increase their profile by further dividing the country on racial lines. They're kind of a victim of that, because I'm sure in this desperate time for them, where they were concerned as hell that their son was going to end up being put in prison for the rest of his life, They came along and said, no, there's a case for self-defense here. Meanwhile, I gotta say, if they're influencing that, the most beneficial thing for Carmelo Anthony at this point, as sad as it is for him to take a plea deal and get a reduced sentence of some kind, because you're not going to be able to plead self-defense in this case. It's just not going to happen unless you are able to successfully taint the jury pool with your messaging ahead of time, that's sick as hell any way that you slice it. But that's the only strategy. And people that aren't part of the family and are just there because of the political aspects and the social aspects, they couldn't care less about Carmelo Anthony or his family. They just care about raising their profile and raising their financial worth. So they're getting, it's the Black Lives Matter scheme all over again. They use victims of tragedies that are black to mooch off of and make a bunch of money off of, and then they disappear and suddenly reappear in big mansions and massive houses with tons of cars and bullshit like that. And it's sick that is people that are trying to, it's ironic, but it's still disgusting that at the same time we're talking about black people that are doing this to other black people. And so I just to be honest and fair about that whole situation, I didn't know. Now there is still plenty of information that that was discussed during the situations, during the interviews and events that have been at press conferences and things like that have gone on. As a matter of fact, I'm not even going to talk about it. Maybe I'll talk about it at some other point, but I'm too disgusted by it at this point. This is the exact kind of person I'm talking about. The last time that the Anthonys had somebody at a press conference, which once again, why are you holding press conferences about this? Like, shouldn't you be, at home with your son, and shouldn't you guys be spending this time together and like that? You shouldn't be out here with this, I'm sorry, but race hustler who is here to make money off of you, and rile you up and get you all excited and get you all angry, so he can raise his profile and like they always try to do, always come off as I'm the savior for the black community. It's like, motherfucker, you're the person who is trying to destroy the country by tearing open the old wounds that used to be so much worse and have over time grown to the point where they were nearly healed, and you just had to rip them open again because there was financial benefit for you. It's fucking sick, and it shouldn't be happening. But once again, because I genuinely believe that in this scenario, as I've learned more about it, and I'm sorry to go on and on about this, but I'll just mention this. I genuinely believe that this was a very unusual and abnormal circumstance where everything really just seemed to line up really bad. But don't get me wrong, the aggressor in this situation was Carmelo Anthony. He escalated the situation, and he also was the individual who basically, what's the word? By saying touch me, escalate. He by provoking. That's the other word I was looking for. By provoking Austin Metcalf, when Austin had simply gone in to say, hey, he didn't know. I'm sure that this guy knew he was in the wrong spot and didn't care anyway. He just like, hey man, you're in the wrong tent. If facts come out that disprove that, okay, but it doesn't seem like that's the case, because once again, people haven't talked about this, but there is taped evidence of the event that people have hinted at in certain press conferences, but no one's released the video yet, and I can't help but still think that that's because, if you want to prove guilt, I would almost bet my life that everything that the defense is trying to use as a narrative for why he was not the instigator situation, I can almost guarantee that on one of those taped versions of the event, from a good angle that can catch some of the sound, there's going to be some pretty damning evidence that will be irrefutable and will speak to the credibility and character of all the people involved in the situation, and it's not going to look good for the defense. But that's why I say, not only is this a case where it's clear based on his own words that he gave to the police, that I did it. Is there any way this could be a self-defense case? You can't. You go around, you talk to officers, interrogating officers, or officers along the way to a some sort of holding facility. The worst thing you possibly do is blab your mouth in the car or in the location that you got this. I got this under control because it's obvious what's happened. And sorry, I'll get back to this, but I just had to point that out because what James is talking about there when he says when he was talking, not James, when Dave said there the what was the word again? Let me go back and see if I can catch that word.
The premise.
No, you're
Doing this correctly, James, feel free to. Did not do a good enough job gatekeeping. Ways we have to blame the previous gatekeepers because they, in some sense, the most dangerous thing that a modern society can be in, where we're just going to all as Constantine further into podcastistan as Constantine is talking about.
No, you're not wrong. So the social constructivism I talked about earlier is relevant, but also what you're witnessing is postmodernism. What he's actually putting his finger on is called the postmodern condition. So now we have, I guess, the alt media, which largely codes right. Podcastistan is a great name for it, because if you don't pay your right dues to it, then they'll kick you out. It has gone postmodern. This is the postmodern condition, and everything that went along with postmodernism on the left that sucked is going to come here that also sucks. But the social constructivist viewpoint, which, by the way, critical constructivism is the formal academic name for what we call woke. The social constructivist viewpoint is that there's a they out there, the critical constructivist, because you got to be critical theory of it. There's a they out there who have gate-kept the institutions so that their knowledges are considered valid and nobody else's outside knowledges are considered valid. Therefore, outsider knowledge that challenges the existing establishment is considered more valid. And so that's actually also what he's touching on. So this is why these people qualify under a brand name like woke right, because most of them identify on the right. They push so-called right-wing values, and they've adopted a left-wing epistemology. I said that in long form with Winston on his podcast when we were at ARC together and talked about this same issue. So they value outsider knowledge that supports a prevailing anti-establishment narrative, aka a critical theory. And so this is what we're actually seeing and of course Constantine has envious here, a way with words that is sometimes just positively magical, and he's done it extremely well there. I'm a little frustrated with my friend Douglas from that debate, because the word that didn't come up from the journalist that should have come up, that needed to come up, that I'm dying for it to have come up, is due diligence. It's not about expertise in that particular discussion they had. It is about whether or not due diligence has been done before reporting is being brought to the surface. And Douglas's point was, I've done due diligence before I wrote my book, and you haven't done due diligence for the amount you talk about this. And due diligence is a concept that hasn't fallen out of view. Like, you looked up the Alan Shepard stuff. That was doing some due diligence on this. You vet all of the clips that you show. That's doing due diligence before you put together your show. That's actually a high standard of journalistic integrity. It's not present in Podcastistan. And as Constantine kind of has poked that bear and revealed, they don't like having that mirror held up to their face, but that's because they're postmodern and don't have anything else.
I swear, he nailed it so perfectly. And when I saw that clip the first time, I was like, man, out of nowhere, James Lindsay with the fucking perfect summary of exactly what it was that sat wrong with me when I watched that first discussion with Dave Smith and Douglas Murray. The idea of and he said the word, although I don't know why Douglas didn't have that idea come to mind of what was it? I already forgot what he said. The name or the word that he used. I'm gonna have to go back and I swear I'm having such a hard time with this today. I don't know why. Geez, hold on just a second. I'll remember it, and I'm going to make you guys listen to it. Due diligence. That was it. Yeah. Man, I found that really quick. So the whole point that was being made, and this what really pissed me off, by the way. This is the part that really upset me because it was a straw man right out of the gate. It was a straw man argument, and you could tell that just being challenged on his position or just being questioned about his beliefs on something, he immediately gets triggered. Like, he gets angry immediately. And you could tell, he's not angry so that he's out of control, but you can tell by his tone, like, how dare you challenge me? And so he words it in just as ludicrous a way as like, oh, so I have to go to every location that I ever want to make any kind of do any kind of discussion about. And Douglas kind of says something like that wasn't exactly the best follow-up, but he was kind of making a point that, well, if you want to have the best perspective on something, then yes, absolutely, yes. And that's a journalistic perspective, and it's a very good journalistic perspective, but it's not one that is exactly per se on. See, here's the problem: the lines between media and news have been drawn so like fuzzy and so broad and so so wide that nobody knows where anything falls anymore, and they take people's obvious opinions and just roll with them. So my problem with Dave Smith is when he gets called out for the fact that you sure talk about this conflict a lot, and you speak as if you've got some sort of authoritative expertise on the history of the region, the history of the conflict, etc., yet you haven't even one time been to the area? And that's pretty surprising if you're talking about from a reporting or journalism, or let's just be honest about it, a objective journalistic standpoint of seeking truth. And that's the thing, is that, like, I know it sounds maybe a little hypocritical coming from me, but I don't brand myself as anything other than what I am. I'm a pretty center, maybe slightly right-leaning entertainment host. I mean, I don't even consider myself a political podcast. I consider this to be about culture and about societal norms and current events and things like that. This is not a news show. I would never claim it to be a news show. I use the under the labels that you can choose from. I label news just simply because that's the only word that's there that kind of is, I have to use that word in that context. But given a choice, and from my own hand, I would never label it as a news show. I would label it as a current events show and entertainment show. Like I said, and that's because I know what I can speak on with some degree of authority. And when those things come along, I believe me, I'll let you know, because I have no problem letting you know. Because when I know something about a subject that I'm very knowledgeable about, I not to say I'm a dick about it. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying that I have no problem letting people know that, because I'm confident in my ability and my experience to relay the real, honest facts about something. I'm confident I can lay them out. When I don't, I will add the caveat that this is my perspective, or something along those lines. But when certain people talk, especially like, that's the other thing I don't understand. This is getting into Sam Cedar territory, who, by the way, it'll be coming at some point, because I can't. You want to talk about somebody that is one of the biggest problems in media? It could be summed up with the name Sam Cedar. The guy is a cancer when it comes to media. He's an absolute fucking piece of shit. He's one of the most disgusting people I've ever heard speak. He's got not 1 ounce of honesty or integrity or even a moral compass whatsoever. He's just a jerk. He's just a jerk with a chip on his shoulder, a really loud mouth, and complete smart ass attitude. The guy's a scumbag. But anyway, and so is his stupid dumb bitch co-host, by the way. She's a real piece of work as well. I'm sorry, that's besides the subject. I don't want to go starting off on crazy tangents there. But yeah, I see where it may be confusing, and I let's face it, in terms of situation, I know that Dave Smith is a popular figure in podcasting, but once again, I've never been able to really get into his content because he just has a naturally arrogant sort of personality that it just completely turned me off when I heard him speak before. And I discussed this, or did I? Maybe I didn't discuss this. I'll bring it up again. If I did, I'm sorry, but I just have to get this out because this is one of those things that really kind of showed me immediately, without even knowing the guy that well. Kind of getting the idea of okay, I see. Because I don't know if you remember the PBD podcast where the first time they had Chris Cuomo on to debate. Now it was to debate Dave Smith, but if you don't know, it was originally to debate Tim Pool. But Tim Pool was all for it. He wanted to do it, but Tim is now once again with Tim, I have my issues with Tim. I don't agree with Tim not very often. I don't agree with him all the time. He's maybe about 50-50. Nevertheless, I know that guy works hard. He works extremely hard, and he has always been a boots on the ground guy when it comes to reporting for his entire career. Now, he was originally supposed to be the one to debate Chris Cuomo. But he made a request because he didn't want to miss his own show. He's kind of anal about that, I've noticed, but I mean, I understand it, but he is kind of anal about that. And so since he lives in a different state, and he would have to get to the place where I don't even remember if they were at their studio at the time or if they were somewhere else, but he would have to get there and then get back and be early enough to where he could do his show. He didn't want to have, I think they had guests booked or whatever. So he said that, look, I'm down to do it. I'd love to do it, but the only way I'll be able to do it is if I can get onto a first-class flight, because that's the only flight available to make it at this time. And then to get back, I can't remember if it was the same thing, but because it was a first-class seat recommendation, the people from PBD tried to play it off like he was making all these demands that were completely irrational or like over the top and like he was in any position to kind of get like. But the whole point wasn't that he wanted some super special treatment to get there. It was that this is literally the only flight that I can get that would allow me to make it back to my house in time to begin my show. So they refused. But instead of just letting it sit and letting it go, the PBD podcast guys, which I love the show, but every once in a while they do something like, what the hell's wrong with you guys? Why the hell do you guys got to do that? Like, I know you guys are smarter than this. Is it just some sort of weird vendetta or something? They tried to take subtle jabs at Tim Pool, and it even happened the night that Dave Smith and Chris Cuomo were there, and they made some sort of hint that we know you need to have a private jet to get down here. It was like, and Dave just kind of chuckled along with him, and I was sitting there going, wow, that's kind of a low blow to completely misrepresent the whole situation, and not even allow the full story to be heard because you were so offended he would ask for special accommodations when the guy has his own show that he's dedicated to and wants to make it back for. I mean, I didn't see why that was something that they had to treat with such disrespect, as if he was once again asking for some super special treatment. So that was the first time I got this hint that maybe Dave Smith is not exactly the most most honest and more, because he didn't lie exactly, but he wasn't by any means going to it'd be no problem whatsoever to just take just a sec. Well, to be fair, the guy has his own show and he wanted to make it back in time for that. So even if you want to joke about it, you could at least throw the caveat out. But that's what I got kind of bad vibes on. I was like, they're just trying to trick his audience into thinking that he wanted this for reasons just about himself and nobody else. That's fucked up. And so, and then when I saw this, when I saw the reaction from Douglas of when's the last time you've been to the area, and he's like, never been, and Douglas goes, you never been, because I played the clip on the show, you remember that, and the response you could immediately tell that Dave was like, what? He just like had that sort of incredibly indignant, smug attitude of like, oh, so I'm not supposed to talk about anything if I don't want to fly out to the region. It's like, no, that's not what he said. You're straw manning his argument. You are responding in bad faith. It's not a non-argument. It's an argument from a place of perspective. It's an argument from a place of authority on a situation. And if you are going to make arguments from authority, which you do, then you should have some authority by means of, at the bare minimum, being willing to travel to the region that you're talking about on a regular basis. And that's the key right there, is that you're not an Israeli, you're not a Gazan, you're not a Palestinian, you're not, as far as I know, you're not even Islamic. I know you're not Jewish. What is your obsession with this story, if not it being around some sort of dedication to the Israel-Hamas conflict that has you worked up in one direction, and clearly from the direction it seems like it's anti-Israel. And the point that I'm making is whether or not, I have no doubt that Dave Smith is not a Hamas supporter. I have no doubt that Dave Smith is not anti-Jewish. But, and here's where the situation is kind of, where things get a little bit dicey, is that the propagandists for Hamas and for the anti-Jewish Islamic sort of countries, I mean, they blitz the media there with that kind of messaging. And they blitz it in other countries too, like crazy. I mean, the amount of Hamas propaganda, I was talking about this earlier, it's just crazy, off the charts with how much they try to slander Jewish people. And when you talk about how many people have been killed in this conflict, one thing that nobody ever mentions, where do you think the death toll numbers come from? It's not from the IDF, it's not from Israel. So it's got to be from only one place, Hamas. Hamas is giving you a death count. Now, why on God's green earth would any reputable journalist ever give a body count number from Hamas? I mean, I don't care. I don't care what the situation is. I would never trust Hamas to give me accurate information about anything. So the fact that a guy who supposedly is anti-Hamas and which, by the way, another thing, I'm so tired of hearing everyone was so upset by October 7th. Doesn't seem like it. Doesn't seem like it because once again, I am actually somebody who, believe it or not, I knew barely anything about Israel, about Gaza, about the region there. I'm not some kind of intense follower of the Israeli situation for years and years. I only heard about a lot more facts about the region maybe 6 months to 8 months before October 7th. Like, it just happened to coincidentally be in that same time period, although I guess it kind of makes sense because, tensions were rising in that area ever since Biden took office. That was just another collateral sort of situation. But the thing that really got my attention was how many people would say that all the time. Like, we all were so upset. But then at the same time are like, well, I don't think the response is correct. I think they're doing things about it. First of all, I mean, you sure seem to get over it pretty quick if you really were affected by and it really did impact you by seeing the events of October 7th. To me, I still think about that day, and it's hard. It's hard because I did watch the footage, and my God, it's I'll just stop there because I don't know, if you can see it and you can stomach things like that, go ahead, but I'll just warn you, it's a tough watch. It's an incredibly tough watch. And this is coming from people on this other side now that deny that this happened, that deny that children were killed, that deny that women were raped, that deny that there were beheadings and all of this stuff. You guys were so excited to tape it and send it to the victims' families and send it to your own families, proud as hell that you killed Jewish people. And so this is where it gets under my skin, because if you go to the region and, you hear people in the area talk about how, certain things like here's a good example. When you have an entire country that, because of their nature, they have to deal with rockets being fired at them from neighboring countries. And because they don't want to escalate a conflict, they go to instead the effort to build and put into operation a massive defensive system that enables them to utilize automated targeting system to shoot down incoming rockets and sirens in areas where there may be incoming rocket fire. And you have to deal with that day after day after day, everywhere from schools to businesses to homes to, wherever it might be. And why? Because your neighbors have decided that they want to indiscriminately fire into your country because a dead Jew is a good Jew, and they probably earn a little money from, Tehran when they say they killed a Jewish individual. That was going on for years before October 7th. And then October 7th happens, and well, no, wait, no, we can't have, we need to make sure we don't escalate this armed conflict. That's what people should have been saying when the rockets were coming in, not when they bulldoze and paraglide their way in and massacre a bunch of people. So, anyway, just going back, my point is that what you hear it in the way it's referred to as blockades as opposed to checkpoints. You hear about it when he flat out says, I suppose you would say that Israel is operating a sort of concentration camp for Muslims. And Dave goes, it certainly fits some of the descriptions, yeah. Meanwhile, he doesn't talk about China. He doesn't talk about, places in Africa and God knows how many freaking other countries in the region have serious civil strife and inhumane and absolutely barbarous conditions and tyranny over the people. As like, but you want to focus on this one region with one group of people who have been fired on and attacked for years, and they finally had a situation where it was taken too far, and they decided to go in. And there's going to be issues and problems with that, but this idea that there's some sort of moral good that needs to be considered before war. It's like, yes, but that also has to, once again, and here's the problem, he tries to do this, and this is why I think it's so manipulative, and that's one of the other problems I have, is that his arguments are meant to tug at your heartstrings, to get you to believe a position that really is irrational when you think about it for more than a few seconds, if you aren't persuaded by the moral aspect of the argument, which is that when it comes to morality, okay, yeah, you can say all this stuff happened and it was bad, but no innocent people should be killed. That's just a moral fact. Yes, that is a moral fact, but when you talk about war, you're talking about incredibly complex subjects, and you're talking about ones where there is no good guy. But once again, going back to this scenario, if you are the president of a country and you got attacked like that, and a bunch of citizens from your country were taken and kidnapped, and you know, based on the returned hostages, what kind of conditions they were forced into, what kind of like the way they were treated, how you find out through a very sick display how they will parade around the corpses in coffins of 2 children and a box that supposedly contains the mother, when they find out actually these monsters didn't even return the right body. It's not the body of the mother. They don't know who the body is of, but it's not of the mother of the 2 children. And another guy who actually was pretty sympathetic to Palestine and tried to work with Palestinians to give them better conditions for their own lives. Been doing that all his life, and his thanks was murder at the hands of those people. And it's like, it's just like, once again, you get into the morality of it. It's like, sure, there is a lot of moral ambiguity here, but that's war, and that's what happens. And you go to the lengths that Hamas went to. Not only do you do that, but then you put your own citizens in harm's way on purpose. The reason is because you want international opinion to turn against Israel. It's incredible that that works, because people like Dave are looking at murder as if it's murder. War is not something that can be used to discuss the context of a situation where someone is killed. And he genuinely seems to believe in his heart of hearts that Israel doesn't care and is trying to kill innocent people. When you look at Hamas, who actually did try to kill innocent people, and I'd say there's a little bit of a difference between the way the IDF operates and the way that Hamas operated. And I don't how, it just seems wild to me how anybody could compare the two and somehow draw a moral equivalency. And then the problem is now too that he keeps doubling down. And once again, I just see this narcissism. Like, he can't stand the fact that he's being challenged on it. So he has to go on, because not only do you have to have that discussion with that guy who, like I said, he didn't exactly give the most good representation of either Douglas Murray or a good argument against Dave's position, but he, at the same time, but then anyway, then now Dave has to go out and he finds that Douglas Murray wrote an article about the whole situation. And so now he's got to come out and make an angry video where he's talking about that too. And I don't understand why it's like, dude, okay, can't you just admit that maybe I don't have a full view of the situation. Maybe I don't understand everything that's going on in the area. But they're just my opinions, and I should be allowed to have them. Because I'd agree with that statement 100%. But just come out and admit that you don't know everything. You don't know the situation, because you've never been to the area. Like, just add some kind of caveat on there that lets people know. Because when you speak, I'm sorry, you speak authoritatively, like you're incredibly knowledgeable about the situation. And then when somebody challenges you about your knowledge, about knowing what's going on there today by, I don't know, visiting, and I've never been. And it's not because you don't have any money. I know you got money. It's not because of that. It's just because you don't care to visit. You don't care to visit. You don't care to get the best understanding of the situation. You'd rather just talk about it constantly with your opinion and never tell everybody that it's just my opinion. So that's where the real frustration gets me kind of a little bit heated. And once again, when you hear, when I heard James Lindsay discussing that, it's like that point he brought up of due diligence, that's a reporter's perspective, and the line's getting blurred so badly. But you can't operate as a journalist doing their due diligence and a commentator who is not completely knowledgeable, but go on and on and on day after day after day discussing the events in a scenario, in a situation that you really don't have a clear understanding of, yet you reach millions of people that all look to you for information. That's where it gets really kind of dicey. Now, you can, of course, provide your perspective and you can voice your opinion. Once again, like I said, that's fine. But it's incredibly irresponsible when you don't put in the asterisk. I'm not exactly the most, I don't know how to word it, but my point is that don't speak with the authoritative voice on a situation unless you actually have some kind of authority to speak from a position where your word should be treated as a extremely knowledgeable and highly reputable source on a certain topic. I won't talk about subjects in depth that I know nothing about and make you guys believe that I know about them. I will put a disclosure out that I've never been here. I've never actually done this. I've never actually been a part, example of, as I've talked about before, I used to be a tattooer. I was a tattooer for 8 years, a full-time job. That was right around the time of, when I first started, actually. It was right around the time when LA Ink exploded. That was so stupid. But you had all these people that were coming in during that time period, and they wanted to know what it took to get a job in tattooing. And when they learned what actually went into the process, it was kind of funny that they never would come back. Because I'll just tell you, you have to be shot bitch for a year. If you want to do an actual apprenticeship and learn the way to tattoo from someone who is an actual veteran or somebody who's been doing it for a long time, and you want to learn, I mean, that's the tattoo culture is very they maintain their traditions. They're very insular in terms of the way the culture operates, and the people that are actually in the business are people who still try to operate by the norms. If you've ever called in a tattoo shop and heard the name, heard the phone pick up and someone says tattoo shop, there's actually a reason for that. I'm not going to say it because it's part of the tattoo industry and part of their traditions, but there is a reason for that. And I was told at one point finally what that reason was, and it was funny because I had to answer the phones already, with that as the way I answer the phones. But that was only with a couple of shops I was working at. Some, as a matter of fact, wanted me to not answer the phones that way, and I knew right away when I worked there, it's like, oh, these guys don't really know the history of tattooing that well. That's kind of weird. And it's like, and it was always from people that either weren't particularly serious, or they didn't respect the history of tattooing. They didn't respect the sort of culture, the tattoo culture, Americana culture, Sailor Jerry, and at heart, old school tattoo culture. Whereas I could tell you how you make old tattoo stencils with ace tape and knife and coal. It's an interesting process, but the point is that I can talk to you guys about that from authoritative perspective, because I tattooed for a long time in actual tattoo shops, and I had to learn contamination control, about bloodborne pathogens, and all that. I had to get certified in that, and so it's no joke with that kind of thing. And so to bring it back home and just summarize this final point, it's not that he has an opinion. It's that he presents an opinion with such an absolute sort of absolute, like, he does have charisma. He's got a hell of a lot of charisma, and he uses it to present a perspective, and that charisma can be confused with experience, and that part's just not the case, because he doesn't have the experience to be able to speak on the things that he's trying to speak about and have them be real good faith perspective based arguments. So I'll stop talking about it after this. I thought that was really interesting, and I hope that whole thing doesn't go on much. I think it's going to take Douglas Murray to just kind of be like, this guy, he's just not worth arguing with anymore. He just doesn't get it, and so okay, fine. But because I'd heard some other guys speak on this before, and it's just like, it really is a situation where he just doesn't get it. He doesn't care that he doesn't get it. He's convinced that he's right. So there's really no talking to somebody like that. And it's kind of a pet peeve of mine in people that are that way, because when you're that stubborn or that unable to just admit something that is an obvious truth because it's maybe damaging to your name or your brand or your company or your character or whatever, I think it's even worse, because if you aren't able to own up to that, because not being able to own up to the areas where you fall short is it's a sign of that insane level of arrogance and almost borderline narcissism that really, I just can't stand it. So anyway, we'll move on to the last thing I was going to talk about, which is one thing I haven't talked about this week yet. Has been big news. The exportation of Mr. Maryland Man Garcia, or sometimes referred to as Mr. Maryland Father Garcia. I forget I can't even remember his first name, to be honest, his real first name. But I mean, it doesn't really matter. You don't really need to know, because the news has called him that so many times now, that Maryland Man or Maryland Father so many times now that his name's pretty much pointless. He might as well change his name, even though he's not a Maryland man. He's an El Salvadoran man who is now in El Salvadoran Supermax prison. So this guy was the focus of the Supreme Court case. Now, before I get into the clips, I want to make something crystal clear to anybody that's watching, and make sure that people understand this, because this is absolutely freaking ridiculous, and it's stupid, and it's manipulative, and I'm tired of hearing it. So here's the story. Supreme Court, this case comes up before them. They make a decision. What's their decision? Their decision is slightly, well, first let me just say, it's kind of difficult to understand, because it's not really a hardline position either way. But even when you read it, it can be difficult to understand unless you know exactly what it is that the words that they're using mean in a legal sense. So, first of all, this guy has, and this isn't part exactly of the Supreme Court case, but these are and from the intro that I played, this is the reality. The guy was an MS-13 member, as found out, and I gotta say, I can't stand the way that media handles these cases when they're discussing them, and always presents the case as if the administration just is randomly picking people. They have no idea if they're really a gangster or they're really illegal or they're really whatever. They just pick people up willy-nilly off the street and just randomly decide they're... I kind of mentioned this the other day, but this word keeps coming up, and it's kind of interesting. Due process, as opposed to due diligence. Due process. That's their favorite goddamn word, is due process now. Because all these people, they need their due process. They have to have their due process. First of all, they're foreigners. They don't have the same rights to due process that Americans do. However, they do have the right to have their cases adjudicated. However, here's where the challenge comes in. This is kind of unrelated, but kind of related, and I'll just get this out now. When the Biden administration started letting people in en masse, one mechanism they used to do that was to use parole, which is a very different type of parole than the parole system in prisons. Parole, in the sense of immigration, is a special type of immigrant system where someone who is a resident of another country is having something significant going on in America and needs temporary immigration status to be able to enter the country for this specific reason. It can be, for example, someone in your family is about to die of cancer or about to die of a terminal illness, or did just die of a terminal illness, or did just die, period. It could be something like there's a court case going on and there's someone who just happened to be in the country and witnessed the event but had to go back home, and they need this guy back as a witness in a case. Yeah, there's certain reasons, like, where there's some sort of serious need or humanitarian reason why someone should be let in under a temporary status because of a very specific and highly, basically a pretty significant event has occurred. Now, in these cases, they're always handled on a case-by-case basis. The single individual is looked over for their history, of course, and as long as there's no issues there, we can let them in, have them around for whatever they need to do, and then they usually just go back home. What the Biden administration did was, instead of applying it that way, they decided, well, how about instead of people, we apply this to whole groups like Argentinians, or Venezuelans. We'll just apply parole to a whole group of people. It was obvious and just egregious abuse of the parole system in the United States for immigration, and to this day, and still at this point, a huge chunk of the people that got in illegally got in under parole. Now I'm going to tell you, if they end up in front of an immigration court judge, and their status and their argument for being in the country is that they were granted parole by the Biden administration, if the judge has any fucking level of respect or adherence to the American rule of law, they'll be like, no, that's not cause for being an American citizen. No, you got to go back home. So there's that aspect of things. But there's what does that have to do with the case of? Well, hold on. Let me go back to it. So, there's all this. That's right. The due process. So, so we have a lot of cases like that. But what's insane is that people have had, tons of people, even under Biden still, had been through the court process and had a hearing like that and had been deemed, not fit for immigration and been given literally a final notice of removal, meaning they've exhausted all their chances in court. They've exhausted all their options. They need to be deported and returned to their home country as soon as possible. The Biden administration completely ignored those orders, and just, said, whatever, that's fine. Now, of course, this is incredibly ridiculous and reckless, dangerous, everything else. I mean, there's not one serious politician who would ever just allow that. But, as we've come to find out, the Biden administration was not a very serious administration in the first place. But because of their, there's the CBP1 app where they just allowed people to schedule appointments and they would fly them into the country from wherever they need to be picked up from. This administration was sick. It was disgusting. They let in all these people because of it. And when you hear some of the stories, like I'll play this in just a second. There was an amazing clip of Stephen Miller. This isn't of him talking about all the cases, but just some individual examples of like a 14-year-old girl who happened to be brought in. They didn't know. All they knew was the cartels had kidnapped her, were using her as probably as a rental child, as I've talked about before, where if you're with a family unit, you have an easier chance to get in. So they would stick them with one adult or two adults or whatever, and say that, yeah, we're fleeing as a family. And then as soon as they would get across, they would give the child back to the cartel. The cartel would bring them back across the border and give them to another group of people or individual. And I mean, these kinds of techniques are just repulsive. But this is what's interesting about this case. So this guy, I think it's Abrego Garcia, if I'm being honest about it, like not Maryland Man Garcia. He actually came in 2012. However, in that time period, he racked up quite a record. So this isn't like a guy who just crossed and has been living his life and had no issues. And that was what was articulated in that opening clip, is that and what I was kind of getting at when I was talking about how the media approaches this, how they're just grabbing people up, there's no due process, blah blah blah. The guy has been in court 3 times over this. They found out, yes, it's true, he was affiliated with MS-13. Yes, it's true, he's committed a bunch of crimes while he's been here, including assaulting his wife, who had a restraining order put on him, which is why in that intro clip, when she's asked that question, she just refuses to respond. It got pretty vicious, by the way, from what I heard. He beat her up. He ripped her clothes off. I don't even know everything that happened. All I know is that it got pretty bad. She filed a restraining order, but now it's like, oh, I'm praying that he's still alive, and thank goodness for Chris Van Hollen. Is it Chris or Senator Van Hollen? Whatever. That he would go down to see my husband. It's just propaganda. Once again, more propaganda. But in this case, it's just so ridiculous because, first of all, if you crossed illegally, there's nothing to adjudicate. Case closed. You're illegally here. You shouldn't be here. Get out of here. That should be the standard. But this idea of due process, well, what about the people that have had due process? Oh, they need more due process. Like, what is it that you want? We know what you want. You want them to stay. You don't want them to go, and by any means necessary, you're attempting to make sure they stay here. But the community and the country as a whole has started screaming, no, we don't want these people around. And this is just a great example of one of them. They cling on to this case because there were technicalities, and I'll tell you the biggest one in just a second. But there were technicalities involved that were on his record from back in 2012, like I said, when he illegally crossed, that he had given when he was in one of his various legal disputes, that he was afraid to return to his home country. Now you'd expect, oh, maybe it's an asylum case, but no, that's not exactly what it is. I think I maybe mentioned this part before because I was talking about the Southern California gang system, gang situation, and the whole Mexican mafia control over the Southern California Hispanic gangs, and that whole situation. Now, what he was claiming was that he couldn't return to El Salvador because he was in fear of his life there because a rival gang might kill him. So you have admission he's part of a gang by saying a rival gang wants to kill him. And he had been caught selling drugs and a bunch of money in his pocket, and the typical sort of clothing, and because I mean, if you're unfamiliar with the levels of sophistication of American street gangs, like there's clothing to denote if you're a drug dealer, there's clothing to denote if you're a part of a gang or part of one gang or another. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you would only know if you were in a gang or you were part of law enforcement or something. But the point is that they don't just go in with no knowledge and accuse somebody of being a gang member with no idea of whether that's true or not. They know this stuff. Now, I do think sometimes some things might need to be eventually disclosed to the public, so maybe it gives them a little bit more trust. But at the same time, when they do that, you know what happens is that the gang hears about that too. And then they suddenly change the tactics that they were using from before so that they're unfamiliar to the law enforcement in the area. So not if it's old enough to, not really make a difference anyway. But the point is that if you're talking about modern tactics that are used today, that gangs use to stay incognito but conduct the business they need to conduct, it could be talked about with the public, but there are sensitivity issues around it that make it so that that's not always the best idea. But rest assured, this guy had been, there was plenty of resources used by law enforcement to make sure, yep, this is the guy that should be deported. We need to send him back home. Because guess what? The gang he belonged, the gang that was the rival gang to his, that was out to kill him, they're not even in El Salvador anymore. As I said before, 18th Street was originally another Los Angeles gang. They were kind of in conflict with MS-13, as well as I think there was a couple other gangs they were kind of fighting over turf with. But anyway, they're not in El Salvador anymore mostly because MS-13 won that fucking gang war as far as for El Salvador goes. And so, okay, no more reason for you to be afraid then, right? You can come back and get in your prison cell and be happy because you'll be around all your buddies in MS-13. I mean, but yet here's where it's just disgusting. Our little senator decided it was his personal mission to go down and tell President Bukele and tell his administration and tell all the officials at the jail, oh, make sure they know Senator Van Hollen's coming and he means business. Oh, he's a tough individual. It's such a joke. It's such a joke. And yet, Rachel Morin and her family were residents of Maryland. And it's come out recently he didn't call the family once. He never once expressed condolences or anything like that when an illegal immigrant raped and murdered their daughter or mother and just dumped her body in a tunnel somewhere and took off. Didn't give a shit to talk about her or the number of other, people who've been murdered by illegals since Biden's open border policy. But there's so much wrongdoing here, and the media, for some reason, because once again, there can only be one explanation. In this case, it's probably not exactly the same one for the overarching thing about immigration. It's because of the snowball effect of rallying public opinion against all the people that they brought in, or making them really aware of all the people they brought in terms of numbers total, and that they turned a blind eye to while heinous shit was going on. And it's just disgusting. It's just disgusting that this senator feels more of a commitment to one illegal immigrant that happened to shack up in his state, as opposed to the actual residents of his state that pay taxes and in his district that he actually represents. That he would rather be representing Mr. Garcia in court. So I'll just here's some samplings of the way the media is reacting to this deportation. They're treating it like the world's ending, and it's, once again, of course, it's Trump's fault. So and accusing him of all sorts of other bullshit. But there's one particular narrative that I really have to debunk, because the hypocrisy here is off the charts. It is literally beyond belief that they would use this as a talking point for why this is a constitutional crisis and all that other bullshit they try to say. But anyway, so yeah, here's this little compilation of I know this is a sob, this is a tragedy, and it'd be hard to get through, but we can do it together. So let's watch this right now, because this is really, really, really touching and some important information. So here's this tragic tale. And the heroicism of Senator Van Hollen and his crusade to return the Maryland man to his home with his wife, who he beat up, and yeah, this is just this is big important stuff here. And of course, we have none other than Rachel Maddow, the weird-looking dumb broad herself that is probably the most unlikable anchor on news. But well, I don't know. That's pretty stiff competition. I don't know, but we'll just say this: the fact that she makes the kind of money she makes for doing one show a week is like, man, who owed her a favor? Anyway, here you go. Here's her statements on it. Oh, whoops. Sorry, there's no audio. Now there is. All right.
Earlier in the show tonight, we had the breaking news that Senator Van Hollen has accomplished at least that stated goal. He was initially turned away from this prison in El Salvador today, but then hours later, the El Salvadoran government arranged for Mr. Abrego Garcia to get out of the prison in order to meet Senator Van Hollen, somewhat bizarrely, in civilian clothes at a hotel in San Salvador. Now, we do not have a sense of what this is going to mean for Mr. Abrego Garcia overall. His lawyer tells us tonight he's just learning this meeting happened from social media, like the rest of us are learning it. El Salvador's president just posted online that Mr. Abrego Garcia will now stay in El Salvador's custody. But again, it is the U.S. government that has been ordered by U.S. courts to get Mr. Abrego Garcia back to the United States. So we shall see.
That's the first part, but it's going to be mentioned again. So I will clear the air, but just remember that this claim about the courts ruling that he's to be brought back. So yeah, here we go.
We did just obtain this statement from Mr. Abrego Garcia's wife. She says, quote, "My children and my prayers have been answered. The efforts of my family and community in fighting for justice are being heard because I now know that my husband is alive."
He is defying the Supreme Court. This is a new line that Donald Trump has crossed. And all Americans should be incredibly concerned that this is at the beginning of a constitutional crisis as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, well, as far as you're concerned, you're a fucking moron. I'm sorry. Okay, so here we go. I can't stand it anymore. This is it. So he can shut his fucking mouth about his little constitutional crisis he's bitching about, because he wasn't bitching about it when the Biden administration defied the court order to not pay back the fucking student loans, didn't he? Yeah, he wasn't raising the alarm bells on that one. No. It's only when the Trump administration is deporting fucking gang members that is a constitutional crisis. So let's break this down for dumb fuck here. First of all, no, that's not what the Supreme Court ruled. What they ruled was this is an international matter with an international man in a different country and a different president. Now, if Bukele the president of El Salvador, decided that, we think he should be returned to the U.S. and we want him to go back there, then we would be, this is what the court order states, we would be required to facilitate his return, meaning we would be responsible for providing the transportation for him to get back from there to here. That's what it says. And that's the constitutional crisis. It's that. I'm sorry, I failed to see the crisis here, you fucking idiot. So you and your little Democrat pals can continue to blow the whistle on this all you want, but I really hope that people actually either read the Supreme Court's ruling, or listen to someone other than some moron like you about the facts of the situation. Because no, they weren't ordered to bring him back. The Trump administration can't go into El Salvador and say, Mr. President Bukele, yes, sorry about this deportation. Yeah, you gotta go into the jail and get that guy so we can get him back. Yeah, he's no longer your resident. He lives in our country now, so you got to get him out. We can't do that. He's a resident of El Salvador. He's not a resident of the United States. No matter how long he was illegally shacking up here, and how many people he fucking screwed over as he was hanging around with MS-13, and how many times he beat the shit out of his wife. Sorry. This isn't a constitutional crisis because you're freaking out about losing one of your precious potential fucking voting block. It's just ridiculous that they keep using these terms to gin people up about this. And it's not even out of any kind of, this sense of compassion. Once again, that senator couldn't be bothered to make a 10-minute phone call to Rachel Morin or her mother, not to Rachel Morin, she was dead. Not to make to her mother or to her children or to her family or to anybody to express condolences, not once. And even the governor of the state couldn't do that until Trump did. When Trump did, you better believe the governor called up right away and said he didn't want Trump stealing his thunder, so he had to make sure he called. Though according to Rachel Morin's mother, he really didn't have much to say. He just kind of was doing it more or less to try to make sure that Trump didn't have that ammunition to use against the entire state, even though, of course, the senator didn't seem to care. But and this son of a bitch, this absolute piece of garbage, he doesn't give a shit about his Mr. Garcia, unfortunately out of California. Thank God he's not my actual congressman, but this asshole. His creepy eyebrows and his weird freaking smirk that he makes a lot of the time. This guy's just a creep, and the way he describes things is ridiculous. But anyway, so that's it. That's the constitutional crisis that he's so worried about.
We have the president defying the court. He should bring back someone that was sent there wrongly.
Can't do that.
By the Trump administration,
and it wasn't
back
wrongly.
Home to go through due process.
So to that point, you say this is the beginning of a constitutional crisis. You say that the president is ignoring the Supreme Court. What more do you believe can be done then to compel him to follow those orders?
What orders?
Well, first, there's no question that I think public pressure, the senator going down to El Salvador, the fight that people are pushing back on in Congress and on this action are actually working. Public opinion is on the side of this release. And because this is an issue that's broader than just immigration.
I can't wait to show you the next
president defying the courts. I think that is
fire
alarm, red alarm
moment. Fuck off. Once again, where was this when Biden was defying? You know what? It's interesting. They were told to close the border, too. They ignored that order, too. Yeah. So this sacred responsibility of the administration to follow the Supreme Court precedent. Yeah, man, I really heard you out there in force whenever the Biden administration defied their court orders and was just raising the whistle about that constitutional crisis. I saw it all the time. Democrats were out every second of every day to make sure that the Biden administration was following the rules as well. Yeah. No, they weren't. They weren't ever. They didn't care. They didn't care if Biden did anything against the law. They didn't care if the Biden administration defied the Supreme Court orders. They're too busy ripping apart Clarence Thomas and trying to get him, removed from the Supreme Court or to pack the court or who knows what else to fuck over the legal process because they don't care about anything. Anyway, so I got one more clip on this, and this is just to show that Congressman Cocksucker here has no idea what he's talking about, or he's in fantasy land, because when he said that this public pressure campaign that he's so excited about is going to help get Donald Trump to follow Supreme Court precedent or follow their orders, which, there was no order other than to, facilitate if he was to be returned. Here's something interesting. This is that guy on CNN, by the way, that I can't remember his name, but he's always the guy that's by the board, the board that has the percentages and the breakdown for the graphs and the country during the election season and things like that. And what I love about this guy is, first of all, his energy level is he's got such energy whenever he's doing a report. But the other thing I love is that no matter who it is on the other side, they get so pissed. Every time he talks, every time he brings up anything in one of these segments, they look so mad. They look so mad, and it's because it's always bad news for them. But this is another one of those times, and so I love this one because it just is entirely. I mean, it's exactly the kind of information that's like, wait, what? No, that can't be possible. No, we can't. This can't be what's going on. Anyway, so I'm gonna play that real quick, and we'll call it a day after that. But this is just too good. This is just too good. And it'll kind of clear up some of the misinformation, by the way, that the last guy was talking about when he was trying to convince you that the president was defying the Supreme Court. So anyway, okay, and here we go. All right. So yeah, this guy. I don't know why I can't remember his name. I think it's Harry something. But yeah, whatever it is, I love this guy. His energy levels always through the roof, and the people across from him always are having I think it's just him sapping the energy out of them with his reports or his statistics about the country, because they never seem to be happy about what he has to say, and obviously so. But anyway, here we go. Let's go on with this one, and then we'll see if those claims from before hold water. So.
Let's talk about Trump voters and how they feel. Do they regret their vote?
I mean, this is the big question, right? I hear all these stories, all these articles. All the Trump voters, they regret what they did back in 2024. I'm here to tell you, very few of them regret what they did back in 2024. What are we talking about? Trump voters looking back at 2024. We got a new poll out. The poll was conducted this month. What percentage would change their vote to a different candidate? We're talking just 2%, just 2%. That's not even a wide spot on the road. And then there's this additional 1% who say they would rather not vote. We're talking overall under 5% might or would have changed their vote, Donald Trump voters back in 2024. And then you ask, okay, the same question to Kamala Harris voters, and it turns out the numbers are rather similar. So if there was a repeat, if folks got to be able to redo their vote that they had back in 2024, would the result be any different? I doubt it would be. I doubt it would be, or it would still be extremely close.
So much for the narrative about how everybody regretted their vote, and he wasn't working hard enough on the economy, and he wasn't, all these things they've tried to say about how people are upset that Donald Trump. All I've heard is nothing but praise that he's following through with his promises. But when reality hits, I guess it hits hard. So here we go.
Bottom line is, for all this talk of Trump voters regretting their vote, in the numbers, it really just doesn't show up. So deport all undocumented immigrants. Voters favoring the government trying to deport all 11 million of them. Back in 2016, just 38% of voters wanted the government to try to deport all 11 million undocumented immigrants. Compared to where we are in 2025, 56%, the majority. The American people have come a long way on this issue, much closer to Donald Trump, and I think that's a big part of the reason why Americans.
Now, there we go. That's the look. That's the look I'm talking about right there.
And why Donald Trump's net approval rating on that issue is in the positive. Overwhelmingly been a Democratic advantage.
And there she is again. She's pissed
already.
already.
Which party cares more for the needs of people like you? It's truly something I would not have expected to see, especially after this tariff war had begun. And I want you to take a look here at the generic congressional ballot. Where we were in April of 2017, Democrats were already ahead by 7 points. In November of 2024 on this question, it was a tie, and then, of course, Republicans won control. Where are we now? It's Democrats, but just by a point. This looks very much still like what we saw in 2024, not like what we saw in 2017. If Democrats think they automatically have a ticket back to control of the House, I'd say, hold on a second, Republicans still have a real shot at this, despite all of Trump's theatrics over the last month with this tariff.
Anyway, and one quick thing to just to kind of round out the package there, which, like I said, I love that guy. I don't know if you know, he does have a good poker face. I really have no idea if he's a Democrat, if he's a conservative, is he a Republican, is he anything? I don't know. Maybe he's just not even political. I don't know. It's interesting, but anyway, one of the last thing about that too is that you got to remember that Trump, whenever Trump is maybe. It's most profound when he's on the ballot, but when it's his administration in general, the polls have a very hard time accurately reporting, because Donald Trump generally pollsters just don't get accurate information when it comes to Trump supporters about where they're going to be, like what kind of demographics they're going to be getting. And it was because of the fact that, you know, for a while there, a lot of people didn't even want to admit that they've supported Trump because they're worried about what might happen to them with their job or with their neighbors or something, you know, whatever. But now it's not nearly that bad, and so people are a little bit more outgoing and talking about it. So, but even so, you know, in the 2024 election, that was why the polls looked a lot worse. But still, even then, I mean, it was a landslide win, and the polls showed it being a close race. I mean, so obviously the disconnect is still there. But once again, when it comes to Congress, that's one of those things where, you know, it's that's a tough one. And I hope that, I hope more than anything, like if I really was honest about, if I'm really being honest about what it is I would like to see, I would like to see a large amount of the people that are there just finally go, and a lot of new people with some fresh spirits, some high energy, and some strong will and character come in and actually put some effort into changing the place a little bit, because the Senate and the House are both, you know, they're doing what they're supposed to do, but like it's like somebody that's worked in the same place that hates their job for too long. It's just do the bare minimum necessary and then just get the hell out. And that's like, it seems like what most of the people on Capitol Hill are there for. Not to mention also a bunch of side schemes that are total bullshit just to make them a little extra money. So, Congress and the Senate are well, the House of Representatives and the Senate are both not exactly the same kind of situation and that's why the polls are kind of more unusual when it comes to midterms, and it's easier to get people hyped up for a general election with presidential nominee and everything than it is for midterm elections for the House and the Senate. But I will say this: if Donald Trump is to get more than 2 years of being able to actually govern as a president, they at bare minimum need to keep House and Senate under Republican control, because otherwise, it's going to be nothing but impeachment on one side, at least, if not both, if they both flip. And that's the one thing that really is important, is that I know in a lot of cases it sucks that the conservative candidate is the crap candidate, but they will at least be pressured by the party and by the president to put a vote in for something that would be beneficial, as opposed to some jackass idea that serves the upper class and the politicians more than blue collar, middle class America and lower class Americans, and that kind of thing is not a concern unless it's to have to do with messaging, for the Democrats. Otherwise, they don't have a second thought about any of it. So that's the only reason at all, is that I want Trump's to actually have 4 years and not just 2, where nothing can get passed, nothing can get through. And remember, as I've said before, the Democrats have a hive mind. They don't vote individually. They vote as a group because they do what leadership tells them to do. Unless you're John Fetterman, I guess, and you can, for some reason, have no problem define. Although he's been getting, I notice, a lot more references on right-wing media and a lot more negative coverage on left-wing media, because once again he stepped out of line. He stepped out of line for Democrat leadership, so he's not going to be given always favorable coverage, and because that's what the machine does. That's how they handle a problem. They make sure that public opinion goes down any means necessary. It's going to be a negative image that goes out. So anyway, that'll do it for me, guys. Thank you so much. It's Saturday, so I will see you on Monday. Tomorrow's Easter, as a matter of fact. So have a fantastic holiday. I'll catch you on Monday after that. So thanks for watching. My name's Corey Dean. I'll see you on the next one. Take care of yourselves. Peace.
Now, I can't read it. There's no words on it. Okay. There's no words there. To play us out. What does that mean? To play us out. What is? I don't know what that means. To play us out. What does that mean? To end the show? Yeah. All right. Go.